We're live.
I almost had a stroke.
I just, no, it's not my house. It's a city supposed to. That's
I could.
Or it's mental health facilities.
I'm quite sure what their job is, but it's never the thing that, it's like someone else needs to make, like, and that's that whole stupid report. That was the worst thing I've seen.
But saving money like. Well, even. Well, you know, you're not.
Hey, everybody, it's not 3:30, it's 6:30. And so we are going to get started. We've got board and quorum here. We have our new chair, Councillor Sarah Kirby-Young, and we're going to get today's meeting started. So I will pass it over to Sarah. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you very much, Shelley, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to the PNE Board Meeting.
In and out.
Okay, that sounds better to me.
There we
Does that sound better to everybody else? Yep, great. Okay, I would like to start this meeting by acknowledging that it is taking place on the unceded ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and recognize that the PNE is incredibly grateful to operate from the land. I'm grateful to our host nations for their ongoing stewardship of these spaces since time immemorial. So some of you may be aware that we did recently have a civic election. So we do have somebody new sitting in the seat. And I'm very grateful and honored to have the opportunity to chair the PNE. This is my first meeting doing that. So hopefully folks will bear with me as we work through this. We do have a number of housekeeping announcements that might be helpful just so that people understand the flow of the meeting and how things are going to go. First of all, letting everybody know that the meeting will be live streamed and available on the PNE YouTube channel. And also that the speakers list is now closed, which is pursuant to the procedures that are posted and always available on the PNE's website. So this evening for this public meeting, we do have 3 items on the agenda. And a maximum of 4 speakers per agenda item. I can tell you it doesn't work that way at council, so something that we might want to see. Sorry, that was just a note of humor. So if some of the items are undersubscribed, we will take additional speakers on the overscribed items to a maximum of 10 speakers on any single issue. And as chair, I will call the first and last name of the speakers when it is your turn to speak. Each speaker will have a maximum of 5 minutes to do so. We have a timer that is located immediately adjacent to me. And when your 5 minutes are up, that timer will sound. We'll ask you to conclude your comments at that point. So please be aware that board of directors may ask you questions to gain a greater understanding and clarity regarding your presentation. And if so, combined questions and answers have a time limit of 5 minutes. I will note for everybody that each item will start with a report from the PNE staff, and the board of directors ourselves may have questions for staff as well, which may come after the staff present their report, after the speakers, or potentially both. So a couple of other items, things to note. We do ask everybody to follow the code of conduct, which is also available on the PNE website, and specifically to present any materials you have in a manner, of course, that's respectful of all persons, and using courteous or parliamentary language. Try to focus your comments on the matter that is specifically under consideration by the board. And some final items, there are washrooms located for people that are attending in person, immediately across from the entrance. And if we do have any media that join us this evening, we do have a media plug-in at the media table, where media can record from versus the board tables. So again, I just ask everybody to be respectful of the proceedings, refrain from any activities that would disrupt the meeting, because we really do want to hear any comments and appreciate people that are taking their time to be with us and join this evening. And I think that we can, with that, start the formal part of the evening. So it is my pleasure, as your new chair, to call the public realm portion of the Board of Directors meeting of December 1st to order. And our first item is adoption of the agenda. And do I have a mover to do that? Moved by Director Sahota, seconded by Director Spear. Is there anybody opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Item number 2 is the adoption of the public portion minutes from the Board of Directors meeting that was held on June 13th, 2022. Have a mover, Director Spear. And Director Indeed, second. Any opposed? Seeing none, the June 13th, 2022 minutes are adopted. And that moves us on to the heart of our three items tonight. The first one that we have is an amphitheater redevelopment update, which is item 3.1. We do have a team here will come up and introduce themselves from Reverie and staff from the city's real estate facilities management team who are going to provide an overview of the amphitheater project. And just let us know when you're ready to begin.
Hi there, my name is Thomas. I'm here to give you guys an update on the amphitheater development project. So within the master plan vision that we had, the amphitheater and the heart of the park is literally within the middle of our park. Within the footprint, we're going to see the amphitheater right-hand side corner there. We have a thin line stream Daylight Creeks project going through the middle of that between the Festival Plaza and the amphitheater, and then livestock building on your left. What we're not seeing here on the diagram is actually there's a infrastructure kind of project that deal with upgrading all the electrical and utility underneath that footprint to support the project updates. Seth, can you go to the next one, please? There are a few key goals that we want to achieve on this particular project. One for most is to provide a world-class covered roof structure like venue that provides solution to our current community sound impact. We want to have a permanent infrastructure to help with the efficient setup, cost, and reduce barrier for arts and cultural groups and community groups who's able to perform in this venue. We want to meet a critical venue gap in the market as a growth catalyst for the arts community and help sustain them here locally. We want to provide opportunities for more diversified events, not just concerts, but other local community group can be able to use this venue, this space. We want to support growth in tourism, employment, and one of the key goals to align with city's strategic initiatives such as the cultural shift, music strategy, tourism master plan, economic action plan, and health city strategy. My colleague Courtney is going to go over some of the programming area.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pam, working with the PNE as a project manager to help deliver this project. And so what we're seeing here is a report out of some very recent work with our consultant team to put together a functional program. And that's really the menu of spaces and functions that the future amphitheater requires. And the relative size and adjacencies, any important spaces that need to be next to one another in close proximity, grouped together. So up on the screen, you see on the right, it's the amphitheater and stage, and then their associated front and back of house facilities, box office, ticketing, that kind of thing. And then off to the left, you see the festival plaza that exists right now in front of the livestock building. So it's just a big open space, but it might have these different functions. And I think it's important to know this is not a design and doesn't necessarily represent where these things will occur on site, but it's a kind of visual menu that the design team will use to put forward a design that we hope to bring to the public early next year.
One really critical design component we're looking at is the sound engineering part. We do have Stages, which is a world-class expert as a consultant engaged in looking at these design solutions. So just to categorize a few of them, we have a sound kind of, the field sound engineering. We're looking at modeling, field measurement, compliance, all that kind of engineering perspective. We're looking at rigid roof structure to help with the acoustic and soundproofing. We're also looking at different soundproofing devices, whether it be a wall, a panel, and other things as options. We're looking at a configuration of audio system to help contain the sound within that footprint. It's not to say we are looking at only one solution, but we're trying to pinpoint multiple solutions to achieve that result.
Yeah, this is a sort of snapshot of our overall project schedule. So the first item is obviously complete. We brought a professional consultant team on board early this summer, and they've primarily been hard at work on this phase one that we're calling a sub-area plan, which is really the heart of the park, amphitheater, festival plaza, daylighted creek area, ensuring we have a cohesive design, and then moving forward into delivery of just the amphitheater. And so the following phase two have just started schematic design. And like I said, we plan to bring that forward in early next year, and then move into the detailed design, construction. I believe the construction procurement, for mid to late 2024, and targeting completion of construction in 2026.
Sweet. In terms of consultation, actually a few key points on this stuff we've done so far and the ongoing consultation we're going to do. So we did 5 PNE Public Board Meeting, and that's spent from 2018 to this year. We have regular updates to the Community Advisory Group, also the Neighborhood Focus Group between 2017 and 2022 this year. We did interviews with 30 local artists and cultural groups. We had 3 public information sessions that was held at PNE February 2020. With communication about the amphitheater in the community newsletter in 2020, 21, 22. We did an extensive Top Vancouver survey in 2020. We had about 8,000 responses. We held the open house not too long ago, November 22nd. And then when we engaged the architect referee and the consultant, we had a specialist on engagement who's doing a lot more community engagement, including Indigenous consultation. So in closing, we want to make sure sound mitigation is our key priority. It reduced community sound impacts from the amphitheater is something we're continuing to look into.
Thank you, guys. We'll just see if there's questions.
Yeah, thank you to staff for and our consultants for that presentation. And before we move to some comments, some additional perspective, Shelley, are there any questions or from the board on the presentation at this point? You can also reserve those and we can hear from our CEO. Okay, Shelley?
Sorry. No questions specifically of the presentation, but I just again want to thank the consultant team for coming out and doing an update for the public on. Oh. Sorry about that. No questions specifically, but I did really want to thank both Thomas and Courtney for coming out and working so well together on this project over the last 6 months. Both the PNE and the City of Vancouver team have been really doing a fantastic job to deliver this project, and appreciate all the work that's gone into that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I think also related to this item and connected to the discussion is item 3.2. Which is the PNE Community Open House Summary and Management Recommendations for Future Sound Mitigation. And Shelley Foster, our CEO, is going to speak to this item. So we'll give her a second to get set up and then we'll begin.
Thank you all for being here tonight. This really is the topic that I know that you are all here to hear about. And our board is obviously anxiously awaiting an update and stuff as well. So to get started, I want to say good evening. We had an opportunity to hear from the team that just presented on all the progress that's being made on the PNE amphitheater redevelopment. I'd like to kind of jump now into the next and related topic. And that relates to the sound impacts from a series of shows that were held in the amphitheater in September of 2022. These topics are inextricably linked. Redevelopment is intended to provide a solution to sound bleed, as well as to help meet many other far wide-reaching city goals. So, sorry, I'm going to go take you. Yeah. Thanks. Sorry, I chatted too soon. So for background, as the board, as you've all been briefed on, this past September, the PNE has a significant issue with sound related to the Breakout Festival on September 18th. This sound traveled farther into the community and with more significant bass impact than had been experienced at any show before. This was followed by the breakout disturbance on September 19th, which really put neighbors on high alert. After the festival, there were 4 additional shows booked over the next 6 days. And while the sound profile was improved in those 4 shows, it was not acceptable to an already frustrated neighborhood. We heard from those neighbors. We did respond to every call, every email, and every 311 inquiry. And our team took the time to meet one-on-one with some of the most engaged and upset neighbors. Sal? No, sorry. Yeah. We held an open house on November 22nd to clarify why we felt September was an isolated incident and to hear more broadly from the neighborhood with questions and concerns. We brought in experts to discuss how redevelopment of the amphitheater with the roof would be a significant solution to sound, not something that would increase sound in the neighborhood all year. So, basically in summary, around the September calendar, COVID-19 cancellations and postponements caused a season compression. Restrictions were lifted for shows on April 8th, and promoters began to really quickly rebook, which we are under contract to do. Shows are generally a 3 to a 4 month window. And so taking these rebookings starting in April pushed many of those shows into August and September. With our fair happening in August, it meant that many of those shows got compressed into September. We have never had 6 shows in 8 days outside the fair before, and we acknowledge this was absolutely an anomaly that put tremendous amount of pressure on the neighborhood. We understand balance is required, and we've tried to take that into consideration in the recommendations that we're going to share with you today. So, what we heard from the calls, the emails, the meetings, and the open house was that the sound profile of September 18th to 25th was the biggest and most pressing issue. The neighbors also shared with us concerns related to event impacts that were unrelated to sound, issues with communication, and concerned about how the amphitheater redevelopment might impact their daily lives moving forward, feeling like they had not been consulted on the project. So let's start with the key issue of sound. Actually, Sal, you can stay just on that one for a minute. We heard that the sound on September 18th was way too loud. The bass was way too heavy. Windows and houses shook. The vibrations were intrusive. We heard concerns over artist language, and that so many of those shows all in a row left the neighbors feeling completely overwhelmed. There are neighbors that we do hear from regularly related to sound, but we heard more broadly from neighbors who generally support the PNE, enjoy fair concerts, and haven't called in 10, 15, or even 20 years, but that felt what happened on September 18th especially was just way too much.
There were a number of requests made at the open house from, and those ranged from banning certain genres of music in certain venues to potentially stopping the redevelopment of the amphitheater, to telling the PNE how a sound system should be configured and or run. What we focused on was listening. We spent several hours listening and then working to come up with recommendations for change that we felt would reduce or eliminate that impact, while allowing the industry experts who truly understood the intricacies of how venues and promoters and tour relationships and sound engineers work to help work with us on the path forward. So what you see here are 7 recommendations that we believe will address community concerns as they relate to sound in the amphitheater moving forward. I'm going to go through those briefly. We are going to engage industry sound experts to study the sound engineering options for both the 2023 and 2024 seasons, as well as how that fits into redevelopment. We are working on strengthening our sound compliance contracts and penalties, as well as a promoter tour artist code of conduct. The PNE will develop a new and improved vetting framework to determine what can and will work in the amphitheater for 2023 and 24. And any shows that have possible high bass must receive very special consideration and approval by the PNE senior leadership team. And as I've tried to explain as well, it's not always easy to know in advance what shows will necessarily have high bass. Sometimes you can clearly tell and sometimes you can't. You can do as much vetting as you want on an artist that may have 50 songs that you can see on Spotify, and 43 of those songs have no bass and 7 of them do. At the time you go to contract, you don't know what his music set is going to be or what he's going to play, or whether he's going to play new music that hasn't been heard before. And so there's not always a clear line to knowing what the level of bass for a particular concert is going to be. But we are going to work to make sure that we have the technology and the sound barrier pieces in place to be able to capture that as best as we possibly can to ensure that we minimize the impact. We are also committed that in May, June, and September, which are key months when kids are still in school and probably in bed early, that we will limit shows to no more than 2 per week and no more than 1 on a weekday. We are looking into different technologies of sound barrier infrastructure and sound baffles that we can add to the amphitheater in 2023 and 24. And we do want the group to know that we do work with several amphitheaters across North America that sit in the middle of residential areas or in the middle of a downtown core for best practices. We do talk to the Millennium Amphitheater in downtown Chicago. We do talk to Pacific Amphitheater in Orange County, which sits right in the middle of a residential area. Those are the kinds of things that we take very seriously to hear what they've been doing, how they've been addressing some of the same issues, and working on industry best practices to make sure that we can eliminate some of the mistakes that we made in September. We're also committed to hiring an on-site sound engineer for each show. And that will help us work more closely with tour sound engineers that would have somebody on site that speaks their language and can help shape what the sound looks like in a different format than just having somebody come over to a tour engineer and asking them to turn down the music, which is, as easy as that might sound, is not as easy as it sounds. And as well, we're going to work with some industry experts around assessing the feasibility of certain types of sound rigging that are setups that must be followed in the amphitheater. And so we're looking into the realism of that. Sal? In terms of non-sound impacts, we also heard about issues of resident-only parking, backyard parking, and guest behavior as they exit venues. At the open house, there were a number of requests made about policing backyard parking and trying to reinstitute residential-only parking in the neighborhood. The PNE does this on behalf of residents during the fair time, but we've heard loud and clear from residents that it's something that they would like to see the city do all year round. So, and to help address non-sound impacts, we're making 6 recommendations of how to support improving those impacts. We're going to continue to work to increase ride share options and provide on-site drop-offs to maximize our on-site parking availability. And while that may be limited, there are things that we can do to make sure that we use every nook and cranny on site to keep people out of the neighborhood. We will work with TransLink to increase event service, and we'll help support the neighbors in their conversations with the city around backyard parking. In terms of resident-only parking, the PNE understands this issue very much, and we do pay for the program during fair time because we understand the magnitude of the impact. We will continue to help facilitate those discussions and know that we have heard you on your desire to want to have resident-only parking permits in the area. The PNE is also prepared to reinstate a number of community programs that we had pre-COVID, but have not come back fully into fruition yet. And these include things like the Neighborhood Bike Patrol, which we put out during and after events to help keep the local neighborhood safer, and sending out cleanup crews in and around the neighborhood the morning after events so that we can minimize the impact of garbage and things like that in and around the neighborhood. We'll be bringing these programs back. We will also be looking to improve on-site signage and guest communication about being more respectful in the neighborhood, not just signage on site, but adding it to ticket information on our website and any other ways that we can communicate with our guests about the importance of being respectful to the neighbors that we have. And we will support discussions with TransLink around concerns about some route changes and stop locations on Hastings that seem to be a real point of concern for a lot of the neighborhood. And we're going to involve the local BIA in those discussions because they also had strong feelings about it. We're also poised to host a neighborhood safety forum that includes our neighbors, the PNE, community policing, and BPD, and we'll take what we learn from that to set action initiatives to help reduce impacts in the neighborhood. So the next issue that was raised was about communication and how do neighbors stay in the loop about what's happening and be aware when large decision points are coming that they may want to engage in. The PNE does have multiple sources of information, whether it's web, community newsletters, social channels, email databases, addressed mail, open houses, but we are committed to making that better and more accessible. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now is that the people who generally like to engage with us are integrated into those communication channels and hear from us regularly. But if it's something that hasn't impacted you or you're not interested in, you generally don't take the time to engage in those communication channels. And so if the amphitheater hasn't been on your radar before, then chances are you're not engaged in the communication channels that we have available telling people about amphitheater redevelopment. So we've got some work to do in terms of making sure that both supporters and those who have concerns in the neighborhood have a place to go and a way to communicate with us to hear about what's going on site. We're also committed, We're also committed to improving things like our ticketing program, which we heard has become too challenging to manage, and improving the notice for events and clarifying who to call when you have concerns, how to get a hold of us directly. So in terms of communication, the recommendations that we're putting forward for change are that we are going to develop newly developed community-specific website pages, which will make better information more readily available for our neighbors. We're going to streamline the neighborhood ticket program, reduce the technical requirements, and reintroduce translation. We're going to work to build out a better communication platform with neighbors, and this is a top priority for our management team. We'll increase the frequency of community newsletters. We're going to increase the frequency with which the Community Advisory Committee meets, and implementing quarterly open houses on redevelopment and any other relevant topics so that people can pop in anytime and get updated on what's happening. Sal? And lastly, just about redevelopment of the amphitheater. The September sound issue was isolated, but it has allowed concern over redevelopment to be heightened. There are concerns that the roof is not going to contain the sound and that there are going to be loud concerts 365 days a year. And concern has been expressed that there was no consultation on that project. I'd like to start by addressing the consultation if I could. And as I just mentioned, people don't tend to engage in things that don't impact them, or they don't feel like they're going to have an impact on them at that particular time. But that doesn't mean that there hasn't been a lot of communication and consultation around the amphitheater. As mentioned in the previous presentation as well, there have been public board meetings, community advisory groups, community newsletters, open houses. But saying all that, we're still committed to doing better and doing more and making sure that we're reaching people differently and in a way that's meaningful to them. So I don't want to just say that because it's been done, it's done. We are working to make that better. And Sal, the next slide. So having said that, we want more engagement than less. And so our recommendations on this front are to introduce the quarterly PNE neighborhood open houses and to ensure that during those open houses, neighbors are adequately and highly informed on redevelopment. We'll make sure that notice related to significant decision points on the projects will be discussed at the open houses, and that we'll make those notifications available in a variety of different ways. And at the request of neighbors from the open house, there is a model of the amphitheater design being developed. And once that amphitheater model is complete, it will be on display at open houses and at community events. Next, yeah. So just in summary, we are reinvesting in community programs that we cut during COVID. Some of those really helped manage the non-sound impacts in the neighborhood. We are absolutely committed to building back trust, not through words, but through actions, and building open lines of communication with our neighbors. I hope that when all is said and done, people will know and understand that September 2022 was an anomaly. It's not the norm. And we've learned from the impacts that we put our neighborhood through. I do firmly believe, and we have always believed, that the amphitheater redevelopment will be a solution to the sound issues, not a problem amplifier. So Sal. Lastly, I just did want to point out that we took the recommendations that we were thinking about and we presented them to our community advisory committee on Tuesday, November 29th. All but one were in attendance at that community advisory committee. And I wanted to share with the board that the community advisory committee was in agreement that our recommendations were reasonable, that they went far enough, and that they didn't need to go farther. For example, banning genres of music in certain venues and things. So I wanted to share with everybody that we are continuing to try and listen and learn. And that I say this wholeheartedly, as the CEO, the buck stops with me. And I completely take responsibility for how September was handled and the pressure that it put on our neighbors. But I also want you to know that we're committed to making sure it doesn't happen again. I take very seriously the comments and the concerns of our neighbors. We've prided ourselves on having decades of a good relationship with our neighbors. And I know we need to take steps to rebuild that, but we're committed to doing it. Sorry.
Okay, I want to thank our CEO, Shelley Frost, for that very comprehensive update. And I know that this has been a period of sort of frank feedback and some frustration with the community, but I do want to acknowledge the PNE team for the last week of work between the open house that happened on the 22nd and then the community advisory group 2 days ago, and now we're here with recommendations. So I do want to acknowledge the work, but I also want to acknowledge the serious concerns of the community. But I'm very grateful for the comprehensive presentation. At this point, we do have an opportunity for directors to ask questions with respect to this matter before we move on to hearing from our speakers. So if any directors have questions. Director Spear, go ahead.
I will, thanks. This is working well.
Might just want to bring your mic a little bit closer, and that helps.
So Shelley, you've been here how long? 20 something?
19 years.
19 years. Okay, sorry, I gave you an extra year. Anything ever happened like this in the past?
Good question. So there have been times where sound has been loud. I don't recall a time that it was ever this bad. So we take that seriously. But I also take it as a sign that it's not a result of ongoing irresponsibility. It was a point in time that didn't have balance in the a point in time where we didn't have balance in the calendar. And we had some unprecedented challenges with the promoter and the tour.
I appreciate that. So, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I kind of take away from that sort of unique and unprecedented more than anything that would be trend setting. So, so it's good to know that while it's bad, and we're all here to take our collective responsibility for not doing our job as well as we should have, and that's all of us, including. Sure. But I guess I take heart that it's more of what I think we can all look at as a one-time mistake, trend-setting pattern, which is comforting to me. I just wanted to make one more comment, and I agree with not going down a road of banning this genre or that genre for a whole bunch of reasons. I would add one more that I just think we need to put on the list, and I think it's important to note. You know, were we to make a decision to ban a particular type of music or a particular type of artist, I think there is great risk to the PNE from a brand point of view that can be seen as a discriminatory decision by the PNE. And you're not only making a decision about the artist, you're making a decision about the audience. And where there are particular affiliations and groups of fans that come from a particular sector of the population, like that artist, you ban that artist, you're making comments potentially about the people like that artist. And I personally don't think that's where the PNE should ever be. So I just add that to this was one more reason not to be in the, in the business of saying artist A is okay and artist B is never going to.
Thank you, Tech. I appreciate those comments, and I know the PNE management team feels the same way, that there's a dangerous road to go down in banning types of music and types of artists.
Okay. Oh, there's my mic. Director Sahota, questions?
Yeah, there we go. It was very loud, as you know, I live in the neighborhood, and I'm a great attender of concerts, and I don't mind hearing the concerts. I actually quite love it for my patio. But yes, we did hear from neighbors in that sense. But the work done over the last few weeks around this, and the communication with the community and the real discussions like Ty just raised around, do we ban types of genres? Do we say our neighborhood won't welcome some types of acts versus others? Those are obviously exceedingly difficult conversations to have and challenging ones to have in this day and age. But you have added some resources to what this looks like in the coming times, including some professional staff who understand more about the sound engineering, can work directly with the people, which I understand are very varied. Different acts come with their own sound engineers. When you have a very complicated concert lineup of several acts, everyone has their own sound engineer, and it's a lot to coordinate. And I think the work that all of the staff have done throughout the pandemic and getting everything going again has been extraordinary. I think we would have had some issues regardless. And I think everyone, not being in this space for a year and a half, thinking about the music and thinking about the neighborhood and, just things moving again. Just having that many people in the neighborhood again was a bit of a shock after the pandemic. So I think the recommendations that you're making and the work that you've committed to do, especially around the conversations, given that there will be conversations around the amphitheater and the communication around that, I thank you for setting the tone that we're going to have a very transparent process with the neighborhood, that will have lots of meetings and people have lots of opportunities to engage along the way, and I appreciate that.
Thanks, Director Sawyer.
Sorry, just learning these mics.
Here we go. Oh, no, yeah, it was on.
Director MP.
Thank you. And thank you for that presentation. And I just wanted to just to reiterate sort of your comments that in being a neighborhood venue, having those relationships with the neighbors are critical for our success. And so we, as a board, are all in agreement with that. And the work that you've done is getting us to that place again, or will get us to that place again. I did have more of a technical question, which was there's a lot of things that the PNE can do to be more in control. And then also just from the technical side and your discussions with the sound engineers, et cetera, what was your sense of comfort that things can be done? Because you sort of, you can do all the preparation, but there is sort of that technical piece. And what was your sense in those conversations?
So I think there's two parts to that. Our conversations with the sound engineers that are working on the amphitheater redevelopment have given me 100% confidence that there is a team of leading edge thoughts and minds working on how to mitigate, and that they will be very, very successful in doing that, and that the structure and systems that they are putting in place is going to be incredibly effective in mitigating sound. The harder part is as you said, the technical side of managing sound on site. And I can't, tell you how many times I've heard from people, Shelley, you are the CEO. Why can't you just walk over and turn down the sound? And it just doesn't work that way. The intricacies of how the promoters and tours and artists and sound managers work together. Sometimes they come with what can be deemed festival sound. Sometimes they come with their own engineers and their own sound systems. We have to just be able to have confidence that we can work with those sound engineers that are on site and be able to have the conversations with them to say, we need to do this to make some changes because we're having this kind of an impact to the West. 99% of the time, they're incredibly open to that. And we have good success in doing that. Breakout was an anomaly. And as I said, we worked with a very difficult sound engineer and a very difficult tour that we didn't get home, and we didn't get the response and the result that we wanted. And that let the door open for it to be a really, really trying time. But I do have tremendous confidence that not just us, but bringing in sound engineers to be at every event, to work and speak the language of that sound engineer, where instead of the event manager going over and saying, just turn it down, the sound engineer can say, you can raise this, lower this, switch this around, and you'll get the same effect, but we'll be able to mitigate that sound into the community. That's where we need to get. And I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Yes, thank you.
That's all, Director MP. Okay, Director Mulgrave.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Shelley, for the report. Obviously, it's a really critical issue for us. So I appreciate the thoroughness in which you've gone through this and for all the work that you and your team have done in understanding and responding to the event. I think, I'm a neighbor of Nat Bailey Stadium, so have a really kind of a direct connection to understanding what the impact is on these type of venues and the immediate neighbors. And this type of discussion, I think, is really critical. And also really pleased to see the investments that the PNE, I think it's important that we do make the investments that you've described, both in terms of short-term expertise, but also the investment that's being made around the amphitheater design, with sound mitigation as a key focus for that, I think is critical. One question for you around that, you mentioned that you're investigating the use of additional physical infrastructure sound barriers. Do you have a sense of when you would know more about whether those are going to be practical or not?
it is our intention to try and have those in place before the amphitheater, to have at least the ideas available, and hopefully be able to implement some to try before the amphitheater season opens next summer.
That's great. Thanks.
I feel like this is the, he's the new kid with the mic. Okay, next is Director Rosa, go for it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for both presentations, and thank you to the staff. I really appreciate that we had a lot of learning from it seems to me that you've applied that learning. And I see it reflected in the amphitheater redevelopment. And I actually, along the lines of what Director Moker was saying, did you switch with me? I really do appreciate that the staff and Shelley, you in particular, have taken ownership and really truly opened the gates to listen as much as you have, but also find other ways to engage with the community. I think that's really important, and I think that'll be a legacy piece out of this, where that relationship, as you said, 19 years, and you pride yourself, and the PNE prides itself in the relationship that we hold with the community. And that's not to be tampered with. So thank you very much for.
Just turn it up.
Maybe we can get the sound engineer to help us with that mic.
Thank you for the note of humor, Director. Yeah, I just want to take this opportunity, before we move to speakers, just ask a bit of a question myself and reflect back on this. And that is, anytime that we have an issue like this, it's deeply concerning because it's really important, I think, for the PNE to maintain that relationship that it's worked at for such a long period of time, and to be a good neighbor with the neighbors. And so what I see in this is a number of recommendations laid out in sort of the immediate term to address the issues, but then also the longer term piece around planning for the amphitheater. My question really centers around the fact you've laid out a number of pieces here. This has been done in a pretty quick period of time between the feedback that was heard. And so the question for our CEO is, do you see this as an iterative process that you can be trying these things and adjusting? This is not sort of a, here's the recommendations and done, but that you'll be reporting back and sort of testing out what works and trying to refine as needed?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for asking that. Especially on the communications front, there's no question it will have to be, it will be an iterative process as we work with the sound engineers and we find the physical and electronic technology that will help us. We're going to have learnings from that. So it will continue to be a learning experience. We're committed to not having the kinds of errors, mistakes that we had in September. And yes, the team would be happy to continue reporting out on where we're seeing successes and where we're running into challenges that we have to take a left turn and iterate to find a new solution.
Okay. That's helpful to know because I do think, to your point that you made, that there is a bit of loss of trust sometimes where people have that level of frustration and we are building it back. So, and some of that is just honestly putting something forward and seeing what works and adapting as you need to go. So I appreciate all that. I'm going to just scan around and see if there's any further questions or comments at this point from the board, which I'm not seeing. And then we would have the opportunity now then to move forward to our speakers. So thanks to Shelley for the presentation and for going through all our questions. Much appreciated.
I do just want to show this.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we do have 5 speakers that had signed up to speak to this item tonight. Just a reminder, all speakers, you do have 5 minutes to address. You may receive some questions that can be incorporated within that time. If some of the board members have seeking clarification on what it is that you're sharing. Our first speaker this evening is Walter Meinik. Hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. Did I get that right in terms of the pronunciation?
No.
I think so.
Boy.
Okay, great. So just step up to make sure that they're going to start your timer and then when you're
Okay,
ready.
I'm just going to say, I hope you all got, I sent over an executive summary and then some comments from the petition that we started 7 months ago. Okay, I'll get started because time is short. Hello, thank you for hearing me on this very serious and important issue. I guess I'm kind of the sort of human face that the president's been talking about from the community. I've lived in this area for 32 years. And like my neighbors, I've embraced the 2 weeks of outdoor fair concerts as a sound of summer. I've never had any issue with that. But this year, all that changed, as we've heard. It started with an ear-opening night in July. It wasn't in September. It was in July 31st, and I've got the sound file to show it. And it continued at various levels into late September. There were more concerts, and they were louder, many with that pounding bass that hit our homes for hours. Now, for the record, I live about 1.5 kilometers south and uphill from your venue. Now, according to the PNE's own sound map, it is the south and the east area in Burnaby Heights that get the worst noise from these shows when they're out of control. And you can take it from the very comments that you've seen, and it can be very bad. I then discovered that the PNE had decided to build this large semi-open venue that would potentially be hosting over 60 dates a year. Now that's a really big jump from 2 weeks. The plan stresses best outcome benefits, especially that the venue will eventually become a moneymaker once the sizable debt is paid off. However, I saw that the plan lacked much detail on risks or lessons from other similar venues, at least in the original draft. As a former event planner myself, that concerned me. Looking at other large amphitheaters, I saw that most are located far from major population centers. You've got the Gorge in Washington State, Red Rocks in Colorado, George Beach in New Jersey. And for good reason. Even the Hollywood Bowl is in a non-residential area, and it restricts amplified concerts. Now, unlike the days of the Beatles at Empire Stadium, today we have over 110 decibel concerts with that bass, and that noise travels. I've had complaints in the petition from North Vancouver to Burnaby. Facing months of projected shows and the stress of this year, many of us are concerned about chronic noise. It's about stress, mental health, and even our property values. I've addressed these concerns with the petition. And be in no doubt, lessons from venues such as Red Rocks in Colorado, which is located miles from the suburbs, show that noise causes headaches, not just for the residents, but also for venue managers, as I'm sure you know, and municipal councils. The hard lessons of Red Rock, which was there before the suburbs, are worth studying. A few more quick points. The PNE plan stresses hosting local arts groups. Now, this sounds great, but there's nothing firm about the mix of performers once it is built. Also, given the need to pay off the massive building costs, in future there might be tremendous pressure to book all kinds of acts to sell tickets. We don't know what will come up. And I raise this point because the president did say recently at the November 22nd meeting, the PNE would not stop acts from using their own sound systems if they wanted to. And my neighbors responded this would be the exact same lack of control that caused many of the problems this year. For us, it underlines the questions about the PNE's ability to manage noise effectively. Also, we did learn that noise bylaw offenders do face penalties. However, this always happens after the fact and doesn't stop the noise as it happens. In Europe and other parts of North America, police are on site with the power to turn down volume immediately. This is not the case here, but it is needed. Now, this is obviously the most contentious issue I've seen with the PNE since I've lived here. And with many social needs and rising taxes, the city is being asked to support a project that will cost over $73 million and one facing scrutiny and concern from many residents. For us, the stakes really are enormous. I don't want to have to move. Please remember, noise mitigation is not soundproofing. As a retired politician from here told me, if a semi-open design doesn't work as advertised, we are the ones who are going to be stuck with it. For this reason, we must have an independent noise assessment study before final funding is completed. That is essential. Ideally, rather, many hope the new council and the new PNE board might look at cheaper and less risky options. Many point out the Coliseum or Forum could be upgraded for less, which would make these concerns go away. If a smaller venue is needed, why the 9,000 seat capacity? So as a lifelong Vancouverite, I've always been a PNE supporter. I've worked here covering sporting events. But the potential impact of this project on our area and my family demanded a response. Finally, adding to our frustration is the fact that this kind of venue wouldn't seem to be considered in any other part of the city. I know that the Vancouver Indy brought in millions to over 100,000 fans on the weekend, and it only ran 3 afternoons a year, not 60. However, it was deemed too loud for False Creek and was stopped. Residents of the east side expect and deserve the same respect and consideration. And I really thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just wondering if there are any questions or clarification for any members? No, not seeing any at this point. Thank you for taking the time to come this evening and share your comments. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Really, I'm glad we're having this dialogue. Okay, I hope this can get solved and it's done right. That's what we all want.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Our second speaker this evening is speaker 2 is Susan Stewart.
I'm getting old, I have to put the glasses on. First off, thank you for providing, let's raise this on. Thank you for providing this opportunity to share my comments as a member of the community, not the neighborhood that was extremely vocal and monopolized last week's community open house. I was born and raised and continue to live in Vancouver. I grew up just south of here, which is how I became such a fan of the PNE, and to this day continue to attend the fair multiple times a year, as well as concerts, Fright Night, winter events, etc. I attend open houses when the topic is of interest to me, but do read all the emails the PNE sends out on events in the community. I was at the open house last week to listen to any updates and ask questions if I felt compelled to do so. I heard people say that PNE doesn't communicate, but I feel very kept in the loop because I opt in to hear from the PNE and actually read what is said. Some claim they only knew about the open house the day before. The email I received came out the week prior. I understand that sound was a significant issue in September and was upsetting to some close residents. I also heard the CEO take responsibility, apologize, and commit to her and her leadership team doing better based on what happened and the feedback they saw. I saw that the PNE listened to neighbors that night and answered questions very professionally and reasonably as they clarified a number of things and took responsibility for their error on sound and density of shows. But what I also observed was a small group making the meeting very challenging for others in attendance by speaking out of turn. There was a sign-up list, talking over people, heckling others to support the PNE with a different view about the amphitheater, or repeatedly saying they did not believe the PNE when they said they would do better. They rudely shouted demands about how the PNE must do business, what the solutions should be, and seemed to want to tell the experts how they should handle sound when they themselves likely aren't expert. It was somewhat comical when someone naively insisted that the PNE boss should simply walk over and turn down the sound system, require that all sound systems be controlled by the PNE. I understand that the neighbors are frustrated, but I also believe the staff when they say that what happened in September was isolated and will be corrected. I don't PNE staff wake up in the morning thinking about how they can annoy the neighbors. That would give a different meaning to customer service. I would now like to make some community comments. The PNE redevelopment plan was approved years ago. The amphitheater redevelopment is a small portion of that plan, which will be great for not only the city's reputation, but also for arts and culture groups, community groups, and yes, the music industry, all who are often faced with not being able to find a suitable temporary venue. The amphitheater has to be thought of as a citywide asset with citywide benefits, and I would argue it would also have benefits for those that live in other regions too. I believe the PNE can effectively mitigate local effects, which is logically why the amphitheater is being completed towards the beginning of the larger redevelopment. Nothing is perfect, and we all know that even within the sound bylaws, you can still hear noise, and this is not just isolated to the PNE neighborhood. It seems odd that some neighbors want to stop a project that so clearly is a solution for the sound mitigation they desire. It's my observation that the PNE is a place for everyone. It's not a community center. The park has been here for over 100 years, so it seems reasonable to think that people in the area purchased their homes knowing the property was here, and simple due diligence would have been aware of what goes on within the footprint. Clearly, the PNE works hard to be a good neighbor and do the right thing. I am concerned that a small, local, and vocal group of organizers appear to be working hard to damage the PNE reputation through media petitions when this was an isolated and correctable situation. I read the PNE recommendations for change. I think clear making statements that will limit the ability for the appropriate use of venues on site, limit accessibility for artists, and the enjoyment of the many guests who do want to hear what comes through the amphitheater. Diversity, equity, inclusiveness can be all ticked off on their checklist. The presentation recommendations tonight show what the PNE is willing to do. Thank you for your time and service.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan, for taking the time to come and share your comments tonight in person. We appreciate it. And I'm not seeing any clarification questions, but thank you for being here. Our third speaker is Maria Mussenden.
I just was, yeah, I don't have to say my name, we can say my name. I just wanted to, a housekeeping issue. On your website, it says 4 speakers, not 5. So I kind of see all these inconsistencies, and it gives me, I don't know, what's the word? I can't think of the word. Yeah, I just don't think such inconsistencies should exist, but there are a lot of them on the PNE's website.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you for noting that. We will take that away.
And also,
I appreciate that, but
also to your bylaws mention 2 public portion meetings, but the PNE website mentions 3.
okay, we will definitely look into that. So thank you for pointing that out if that is a discrepancy, but if I just guide you to speaking to
I'll
the site,
stop there.
that would be
Okay.
great. But when you're ready, go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, where is? Okay, take my crooked glasses off. Okay, I just want to say that I love music. I've been to the Hollywood Bowl, amphitheaters in Europe. Love music. I've been to the concert at the PNE with my custom-made earplugs, and I don't think such a concert at this magnitude should exist. So close to a residential area. I just think it's absurd. This is coming in and out. Just got to get close to it.
Yeah, I think you just want to try to stay close to it and you should be fine. Thanks.
Okay, just okay, so I'm going to start. Hastings Park belongs to the people of Vancouver. We, the residents that surround Hastings Park, despite the city of Vancouver having granted the governance of the park and the execution of the approved 2010 Hastings Park and master plan to the PNE, we per se have no business with the PNE. We are simply neighbors. Regarding the PNE business that affects us, it is to the city of Vancouver that we look authority. So the buck doesn't stop with you. I think it stops with the city of Vancouver and our elected officials. I, being part of this, we understand that the Hastings Park has been in law rezoned from a parkland to a commercial land via the Pacific National Exhibition and Validating Act. What seems to have been forgotten by the PNE and the city of Vancouver is that this commercial land sits in a residential zone. If you refer to my summary notes that I submitted, to the PNE for consideration and explored. In some of the text that is highlighted in red, you will see in the venues listed, those in the music industry and the authors of this report point out how concert noise, namely amplified, affects neighboring residents. This constricts or negates the use of these venues, and these are in Vancouver. In some venues, this also applies to wildlife. That there is no such mention applied to the Hastings Park amphitheater. So nothing in this regard was mentioned, the Hastings Park amphitheater. Here, the residents are not considered, with 5 possible concert stage areas in the heart of the park, providing year-round concerts. The impact to surrounding neighborhoods and the wildlife in the sanctuary needs to be considered and studied, as I laid out, submitted in my summary to the report, as well to action before construction. Most people that I talk to are not opposed to the August Fair, but are very concerned about the 9,340 capacity amphitheater. And I also enjoy the fair and appreciate the fair. The 2010 approved PNE master plan with the much citywide consultation shows an amphitheater with a capacity of 7,000. But last year, the City of Vancouver approved amphitheater renewal project with a capacity of 9,340, a significant increase of 33.4%. Renewal project, it seems the PNE has deviated from the master plan. It appears this is not the only deviation. Such deviations with more consultation.
Sorry to interrupt, Maria, but you are at time, so I can ask you to make a concluding comment.
Okay.
Just in terms of being fair to everybody.
Yeah, can I just ask you one question?
You can make a concluding comment if you'd like to do that.
Yes.
I do need to be fair to everybody.
Yeah,
At the
no,
same time.
just one comment. At the City of Vancouver Council meeting, you had mentioned that it seems that the residents approved this plan. I'm just wondering how you came to that conclusion.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Just confirming, I'm not seeing clarification questions, so I think you were clear. Thank you for taking time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, speaker number 4 is Darcy Swinton. Do we have Darcy tonight? We do. Okay, great.
Good evening. I'm going to give this a go. Put them cut out. I've lived in the neighborhood for 40 years. And I love the PNE. When we got here, it was only open for 2 weeks. It was a community fair. It's fantastic. But over 40 years, it's become pretty hard to bear, I have to say. And this is sort of a combination of the worst thing. But honestly, I even think the master plan conclusion will be much worse than the amphitheater. But I'll start. Have you started the clock already? Oh, sorry. Okay. In the amphitheater report, it says Hastings Park is a 165-acre public park. Hastings Park is owned by the people of the City of Vancouver. The PNE doesn't represent the citizens of Hastings Sunrise. Who do we voice our complaints to when the PNE and the City of Vancouver are not listening? The community was largely unaware of any consultation process, including me, and I was on the advisory group at the time, talking about fishing in the sanctuary. The park has to pay for itself, but what cost to local residents is it going to be? The amphitheater is an investment in the PNE, not the citizens of Vancouver. No residential neighborhood would tolerate it. Like, can you imagine it in Point Grey or Kerrisdale? They would never tolerate something like this. And An outdoor amphitheater will irreversibly harm the Hastings Sunrise community. How will the city of Vancouver protect our neighborhood from extreme sound levels, decibels over 70, too many concerts in abundance, no weekends off, no outdoor barbecues? We can't be in our yards when there's concerts on. So when you up the numbers, we have to hide in the house with the windows and doors shut. How will relentless noise affect our mental health and that of our families? There's also the traffic problems. How does the city of Vancouver plan to protect the wildlife? This is a big one. Adjacent to the park, the bird sanctuary, and the horses right next door. We need independent studies of these items done first, please. And I appreciate what you said earlier, actually, that was about studies. I'm glad to hear it. Something's being done about that. None of these questions were really answered satisfactorily November 22nd. The Daily Hive, which seems to be where we find all our information about what's going on this site, quoted, "The new amphitheater is a component of the overall decades-long plan to expand green spaces at Hastings Park. There's nothing green about the amphitheater. There's been zero greening of the park since 2000 and Mayor Owen. When exactly will this happen? We've been waiting for 20 years. What is the climate action plan for Hastings Park? Is this just virtue signaling? Where's the biodiversity plan? What's the process? Where are the details? The daylighted stream needs a much bigger footprint. It doesn't even show up on any of the maps. The preliminary work and funding for it is not even scheduled till 2026. Why can't the daylighted stream be completed before the amphitheater at a cost of $300,000? It's a bargain compared to the $64 to $70 million. And the finances are curious. The PNE is not self-sufficient, as it says on page 3 of the amphitheater report, as the federal government and the city of Vancouver are now about to lend it money to continue. It's really surprising that the city of Vancouver is willing to lend taxpayer funds in the region of $70 million with no real plan for greening this park. But that is almost the first thing on every report since 2007. We request that park board oversight and applied standards should be applicable at Hastings Park as well. This should have been a spectacular, green, beautiful, inviting space. We were promised tree-lined pathways, east, west, north, south, and all around. What we got, and what it says in the amphitheater report was green painted lines and green plastic boxes all over with tacky container shipment things for washrooms and vendors. It's not what we hoped for. And it could have been so much better. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any questions, just scanning here. So I think your comments were really clear, but thank you very much for taking time to share them. Appreciate it. I'll just look in terms of next steps. Do we have any further? Do we have one more speaker? Yes, we do. Thank you. Sorry, I checked that off. That was my bad. I should have another copy. Courtney Komanensky. My apologies. Oh, go ahead when you're ready. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Courtney. I am a board member of the Hastings North Business Improvement Association. And I have a statement that was prepared by our executive director because she's too ill to be here tonight. So on behalf of the board of the Hastings North BIA, I would like to state our support of the PNE in Hastings Park. This was reiterated at our board meeting last Tuesday. Patricia Barnes, the executive director of our BIA, has been involved in the lengthy and fulsome public consultation over the last 15 years plus with regard to Hastings Park and the PNE as a fair within the park. We believe that the steps outlined by the PNE CEO are a reasonable and respectful response to the community, the issue of sound mitigation, and the continued support of a vibrant neighborhood. The PNE is vital to the continued success of our small business community. And we have found that the executive and staff have been increasingly open to community engagement over the last several years. We acknowledge that there were issues in September, but also understand there were several unique circumstances that led to these issues. We believe that the amphitheater development will help mitigate the majority of these concerns and therefore fully support the amphitheater renewal. We are excited about working and partnering with the PNE into the future. And I would also like to add that I live and work in the neighborhood and have for many, many years. I am also part of the community advisory group. I'm a huge fan of the PNE, and it has always been my thought that the PNE has been a great neighbor. I look at all the things that they do for our neighborhood. We have the playland nights, they give us tickets to the PNE, now they're giving us tickets to the fair. They don't have to do any of that. I appreciate everything they do. I love having the fair right across the street. I love being able to go to shows during the summer, and there have been shows at the amphitheater outside of the PNE for many years, and I've attended a lot of them. I think an issue is people just forgot that stuff happened during COVID because it went quiet. I acknowledge that it was loud in September, but it didn't stop me from doing anything in my yard. I didn't feel I had to hide from any of the music. I really hope, and I fully support just personally this venture going ahead. And I fully agree with the statement made earlier about not essentially censoring acts coming through, because that like has been mentioned already before, will just lead down many negative and just horrible roads. But thank you. I fully support what's happening here.
Great, thank you very much, Courtney. I'm not seeing any, just scanning here, I'm not spaces, I'm not seeing any clarification questions, but we appreciate comments from you and from all the speakers tonight. And I do want to take the opportunity to say that certainly as a new chair, I'm listening very deeply. I know that my fellow directors are, and the feedback has been taken to heart. And I do think that this will be an ongoing process. And I'm glad that we've had a pretty frank dialogue. I know that there's some strong emotions on both sides of this issue. But I do want to reassure everybody that we are hearing everything that is being said. And that's definitely being taken away. Is there any other comments from the CEO at this point?
No further.
Okay, that does conclude that item on the agenda. So I do want to thank everybody that came for that item. You're of course welcome to stay. We do have 2 additional items on the agenda this evening, but that does include item 3.2. Okay, and our next item is 3.3, which is the arborist report. And I see that we have Jess Strickland up to speak to that. Go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and welcome to our committee members, Hastings Park PNE Board. Just wanted to provide an update on some of our park care. As you know, frequently whenever we're doing any sort of care of green space on site, we want to make sure that we're advising the board and our community, especially as it relates to trees. And if we're specifically here bringing down some trees that are hazards, we want to be as transparent as possible and just to share this news with the community. So there's just more understanding and to provide an opportunity to ask questions. This update was provided to our community advisory group a couple meetings ago. There were more questions at our community open house a week just recently, and so we wanted to again update the board with this arborist report and the actions that will be taken from that. So if we just moving forward, we, as you know, Hastings Park, or sorry, the PNE and our staff will maintain the green space on our site. We currently have 4 full-time horticulturalists that are trained to maintain our site to the best of their abilities. We supplement them with probably about 6 to 8 other seasonal workers that help with lawns and trimming and things like that in the spring and summer months. But our foreperson, Rob Shannon, is very passionate about this site, as are many of our neighbors, and it is a very important space for many of us. And we want to make sure, of course, that we are maintaining the park space to the park board standards and to ensure that we're preserving the green space for generations to come. Recently, we engaged with an arborist to come on our site to help us assess a variety of trees that we felt that were either hazardous or have already died. And as you know, once a tree gets to a certain caliber, there is a permit that is required. So just as if you were to need to remove a tree from your backyard, Hastings Park trees would fall under the same criteria, and the PNE is required to obtain tree removal permits, which we have recently done. But of course, the precursor to that is this arborist report so that we can demonstrate the subject matter expert's opinion on these trees. So just taking a look at the overall map there of the site, the arborist report, the assignment to the arborist was fourfold there, as you can see, to identify the trees that would be hazardous, to identify bylaw sized trees. So in other words, trees that we would require permits to remove, and to measure and assess each tree and to provide recommendations on how to manage the trees and to avoid emergency damage. So if we just go to the next slide, the findings from the report summarize that there were 36 dead standing trees that were bylaw size at Hastings Park. 22 of these trees were our western red cedars, and there are a variety of other trees as well. There was also a young Chinese windmill palm in front of our administration building. Obviously not a native tree to this area, but it did not last the winter months last year due to irrigation issues on the island in which it sits. So we have to get a permit to remove that one. We have another Japanese maple and 5 dead western red cedars in lot 9. These are larger western red cedars in the northeast corner of the site. The maple died of drought stress and is next to a building and access road, and the cedars border a parking lot. They died due to a drought stress and competition for water with the Lombardy poplars that run along our lot 9 and the wall of the racetrack there, which of course are very water hungry species. There was also, and this was in the report, but it has since been removed, a hazardous silver maple tree that was down in our lot 9 area as well. And it was leaning 20 to 30 degrees east over a parking lot on the eve of our fair, of course. And so even the ground on the other side of that was heaving, and it was a real hazard. So we had to take quick action working with the city to obtain the permit to remove that tree on, I think it was the day before the fair, if I'm not mistaken, but an undertaking that wasn't a convenient time for us, of course, but it was a necessary given the hazard that was there, given the amount of traffic and pedestrian traffic as well. So work done to date. We've received 2 permits from the city of Vancouver, 1 permit for 37 trees and 1 for the other 3 trees. Work has been planned for completion originally this week with the snow earlier. That's been pushed a little bit, but we are working to ensure that we can remove these trees in a safe manner without impacting the park users and also the events on site. We are engaging with an arborist solutions team to come on site to work with our union staff to ensure that our staff are working with the tree removal folks, and we'll also ensure that our OH&S folks are involved, and that we're communicating like we are today and in our newsletters and with the community advisory group to share these updates for everyone, because we know how important, again, the green spaces, specifically the areas within the sanctuary and the Italian gardens, and how much they mean to the community and us here, of course, at the PNE. We will be continuing to remove them this week. But with the trees that are in the sanctuary, what we'll be doing is naturalizing the sanctuary with those trees. So the dead standing trees will be felled and left on the ground to naturalize. And what that does is it creates a haven for bugs and fungi and birds to support a healthy ecosystem. The 3 dead standing trees will have been flagged by one of our local community bird enthusiasts. And we're planning to reduce the height to about a 10-foot height to allow for bird nesting sanctuaries. Will provide home for woodpeckers and other similar birds. And then trees felled in lot 9 will be chipped down. The chippings will be used in garden beds and other areas throughout the site. This helps with our integrated pest management programs that we've shared before in the past, and helping to perhaps choke out some of those invasive plant species that we are always trying to get in front of. So right now, we're not contemplating that any of the green waste will be removed from our site. Instead, it'll be used to support the park's ecosystem. And more recently, as of last week, we've also done some outreach through our partnerships with the canoe cultures to engage with local Indigenous groups to see, specifically with the Western red cedars, if there's any appetite for those trees for carving paddles or any other big initiatives that may be out there. So we have been in contact with 3 different folks that have come down to the site to look at the trees. The Western red cedars, we are lobbing them into 20-foot sections for now, and there's certain different folks that are looking at those. We're hoping that we can also donate some to go to local Indigenous youth groups that are interested in either carving paddles or things like that. But at the very least, we want to ensure that the trees are being used to naturalize the site or to go for a very good cause. Obviously, we will be planting more trees as well as part of the permitting process, and to, as I mentioned, naturalizing the sanctuary. And we'll continue to seek approvals and permits should we require more trees to be removed in the future. But as we know, and we have the experts that are very aware of how to preserve and ensure our trees are safe and maintained properly. But with heat stress in the summer and things like that, we do from time to time do die, but we're always trying to, again, replant new trees or to ensure that our park is full and green as possible and the trees are as healthy as they can be. So I just, again, wanted to provide that update. There was a good dialogue at our community advisory group on this, and obviously we do have some neighbors that are very interested in this. We want to make sure that we're constantly sharing these details with the board and the community. Thank you.
Before you go, I think we have a question.
That's a really good question, and thank you for both the update, because it is obviously important and it's nice to see the plan that you put together, which was great. But yeah, safety is a big issue with trees, and so it's really important that we do that work. And I'm just wondering, so this is a big undertaking. Do we have a regular process where we do this kind of review on a regular basis?
Yeah, as I mentioned, our team, specifically our 4-person on our horticulture team, gardening group, they will do monthly assessments of our site, and will specifically do a inspection of the amphitheater, last topic could be sanctuary, to identify any sort of hazards, specifically any sort of concerns with invasive species. And of course, any sort of trees that need attention. Not always do they have to come down. Sometimes we can help them. And but again, we do those monthly inspections, and we are sharing those at our community advisory group meetings.
Thank you. Oh, that was my question.
I'm going to take the opportunity to ask one question myself. And obviously any loss of trees and tree canopy is concerning when we're having, they provide shade, they're good for our environment, all those pieces. I heard you mention it verbally, but I didn't see it in the report around replanting of new trees. And I wonder if you could just expand on that in terms of, are we looking for a net increase in the number of trees and tree canopy?
We're looking right now at least a net increase, if not a net. We're constantly, if we're removing a tree, we're planting at least 2 trees typically to ensure that our tree count is maintained. We don't want to get into a pattern of net loss of trees, even if trees do expire. So we are constantly planting trees as we remove them.
Okay, so but I mean, obviously the other trees take longer to mature. So is that sort of a standard rule of thumb that we're always planting at a rate faster than we are, or sort of a ratio of more trees than?
Yeah, we endeavor to, the metric is typically we try to plant 2 trees for every tree that we do replace. And I can get more specifics around that. I don't have that exactly at my fingertips right now, but we are constantly trying to. But at the same time with the sanctuary, there was a time where it was perhaps overplanted, so we had to remove some undergrowth and some invasive species and things like that. So there is a strategy, of course, to having a healthy ecosystem, the right number of trees, but we're we're not in a position of wanting to remove or be in a net negative in terms of archery count.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions, so thank you for the report. We appreciate it. That concludes item 3.3, which was the arborist report. I do want to note that we don't have many questions this evening. But with respect to item 4, the next board meeting for the public realm portion, which is typically twice a year, roughly December and June, those dates will be determined shortly and posted this month. It's December now. On the website. And that does conclude the business on the agenda this evening. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Director Spear, seconded by Director Mokri. Any objections? Seeing none, the business is concluded. Thank you, everybody.
1 minute.